Hello, I'm Sheriff Wayne Ivey. Today's parents and kids face challenges like never before. Drugs, gangs, bullying, and even social media have completely changed our ability to keep watch over our kids and hold them accountable for their actions. Today's parenting is 24 hours a day and one of the most demanding jobs in the world. As a parent of 4, I know how hard it is to tough love your kid. But as a veteran of law enforcement for over 34 years, I know that going to visit your child in prison is even harder, and coming to see them here is unimaginable. Unfortunately, in today's society, those may just be the only choices you have. That's why it's important for you to have every tool possible to be your child's personal cop. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. And now it's time to be a parent again. Good evening, everybody. First and foremost, thank you for being here. And I'm going to start this presentation where I start every presentation I do, and that is to thank you for allowing me to serve as your sheriff. I absolutely love this job to death. It's the funnest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm surrounded by 1,500 incredible men and women of our agency, our local law enforcement officers that are doing a great job at protecting you. So you see one of them out there today, tomorrow, next week. You let them know how much you appreciate what they're doing because they're doing an incredible job for you. Why are we here? How many of you are parents? Raise your hand for me. How many of you are grandparents? How many of you are thinking about being parents? All right, that number may go down after this presentation as we talk. So we're here tonight to talk about becoming parents again. How many of you right now feel like you are a parent? All right, fewer hands, right? Why is that? I truly believe that society has robbed us of the ability to be parents in today's time. I think it has stripped from us the ability for us to hold our kids accountable, the ability for us to feel comfortable in holding them accountable for their actions, and most importantly, I think it stripped from us our ability to raise the next generation of parents. That's what I think we're here for tonight. I can tell you that as a law enforcement officer, and I have a number of our law enforcement team from around the county, Titusville and Rockledge and others that are here with us tonight, we get phone calls every day about parents having trouble with their kids, struggling with certain things. We get phone calls like, little Johnny won't get on the bus. What should I do? Whip little Johnny's butt. That's what you should do. That's where I am. I can tell you as we move forward tonight, there is nothing in this presentation that tells you to whip your kid's butt. But there's nothing here that tells you not to either. You have to pick a form of accountability and responsibility with your child to hold them accountable and to empower them to have an incredible future. We are raising tomorrow's generation of parents. And if we don't teach them the proper techniques of parenting, guess what? They're not going to be able to teach it to the next generation of parents either. So that's why we're here. Each and every one of you took your Sunday night to come here and learn and to talk about this. You're going to hear some things tonight that I think are going to shock you. We're going to do a very strong comparison of what parenting 30 years ago was like, 40 years ago, and parenting today is like. What the challenges were then versus the challenges of today. You're going to hear from our state attorney, Phil Archer, who does an amazing job at telling you what your actual legal abilities are as a parent to hold your child accountable. Phil's going to break it down to you, but he's most importantly going to tell you it's your constitutional right to hold your child accountable and to prepare them for the future, to empower them and to steer them towards success. And then at the end, you're going to hear from our chain gang. We are the only agency in the state of Florida, one of 8 in the country, that has a chain gang. And what you're going to hear from them is they're going to come up on this stage, and you're going to get a chance to ask them any question you want to ask them. You're going to get a chance to ask them where their life turned to crime, what was missing, what could have been different, what caused everything to happen, and they're going to answer it to you from their heart. And I tell everybody, we partnered with the chain gang to deliver crime prevention. We partnered with the chain gang to help parents impact their children's lives. And people look at me like I'm crazy. But I can stand on this stage tonight and tell you everything I know about parenting and law enforcement. They can tell you everything they know about getting in trouble and where it led them and why they are where they are today. And the ones that we've done before is I'm standing up here talking, people take notes. Phil Archer's up here talking, people are taking notes. When the chain gang's up here talking, people are videotaping so they can take it back and play it for their kids. That's how impacting and powerful it is. So tonight, we're here to be parents again, and I titled it, It's Time to Be a Parent Again for that purpose. Because there once was a time when we were allowed to be parents. Society stripped that from us. So tonight, we're going to take it back. And tonight, we're going to share it with the next generation. So let's talk about types of parents. There's 5 types of parents. Those that are doing it right. How many of you feel like you're doing it right? All right, not as many hands as we had up for all the people that are parents in here. All right? Now, those that are doing it right are involved in their kids' lives. And sometimes we think, well, I go to my son or my daughter's volleyball game or their baseball game or soccer, and so I'm involved. That's not the level of involvement that we have to have in today's society, and we'll talk about that as we go through. But there's 5 types. Those that are doing it right, those that are doing it wrong. How many of you feel like you're doing it wrong? Now watch this. We have some teenagers in the audience, I think. How many of you think your parents are doing it wrong? All right? Never fails. All right? It's always there. By the end of the night, you're not going to like me very much. Trust me. It's going to happen. All right. Those that are unsure how to do it. And that's really where we see a broad perspective of our parents, is in that unsure category. They're not exactly sure not only how to do it, but what they can do without getting in trouble. Let's be honest. We live in a time right now where if we discipline our kids, we're scared of what? We're scared we're going to hear the knock on the door, and here's Children's Services standing there going, you disciplined your kid. Well, guess what? You got another option. And that option is not positive. That option is not good. Standing down in the courtroom in front of one of our judges, having to deal with those issues. I always tell my kids, if one of us is going to court, it's going to be me. Because I got no problem in standing in front of a judge and telling them that I held my kid accountable. I got no problem with that. Is it pleasant? No. Is it what I want to do? Absolutely not. But I don't want to go see my kid in the cemetery either. I don't think any of us want that. So we know those are our first 3. Those that are scared to do it. They're scared to do it because of the repercussions of maybe getting in trouble. They're scared to do it because maybe they're a single parent and they're scared of retaliation by their child. Or they're scared to do it because their kid won't love them anymore. That's unacceptable. We can't have that anymore. We have to be not only not afraid to do it, we have to be bold and righteous in how we do it. You're going to hear Phil Archer talk tonight about reasonable. He's going to use that word a lot, the word reasonable. And that's what it comes down to, is reasonable discipline of your child. But we can't be afraid to do it. And the last one is those that don't care to do it. Now, I'm going to point those that don't care to do it out to you. These empty seats right here. That's them. I'm never going to get a chance to talk to them. As sad as that is, I'm never going to get a chance to talk to them. But I'm going to spend my time talking to the other 4. The other 4 groups that are up there. The other 4 that are looking for tools and resources and abilities to help their kids be empowered and steered towards success. That's why we're here tonight. That's what this is all about. We all care about our future. We all care about our kids. We all know that our children are the most important and precious things to us. We get upset in society when someone harms a child. But we have to look at ourselves and ask, by not taking action, are we unintentionally causing harm too? We have to take action. We have to be bold in that, in doing that. All right, what are our choices? It's hard to tough love your kids. How many of you tough love your kids? All right, pretty good numbers. Now let me ask you this. How many of you did your parents say, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you? Every one of us, right? And we didn't believe them, did we? No way. This is hurting me pretty bad right now. But what happened? Now that we're parents, we realize they were telling the truth, weren't they? It does hurt to discipline your kid. It does hurt to hold your child accountable, to tough love them as we speak. So that's one of our choices in society today. The second choice is you can come out to the Brevard County Jail and visit your child. And as sad as it is, there might be some in this room that have already done that. We don't want that. I want to get to these kids before they get to me. Once they get to me, they are in that system. Once they get to me, we're struggling to get them back. Fighting to get them back is a lot harder than fighting to keep them out. We got to fight to keep them out. That's our whole goal. And then the last choice is you go see them in the cemetery. I have a lady that came to our very first presentation, came up to me afterwards. She was wiping tears out of her eyes, and she said, Sheriff, I've experienced all 3 of those emotions. I've tough loved my kids. She had 4 children. Tough loved them. One of them went astray. One of them got in trouble. He ended up going to jail. She went out, she did what every parent does. They still love their kid. You're never going to stop loving your child, no matter how much they let you down, no matter how much that hurts. You're never going to stop loving your child. And then she got him out, got him rehabbed, got him back on the straight path, and he got killed in an automobile accident. Nobody's fault as far as doing something wrong or drugs. It was an accident, and it took his life. But she talks about each one of those emotions. I don't want you to experience 2 and 3. I hope you never have to experience 1. But if those are our 3 choices, I'm going with number 1. That's the choice I'm going with. What is discipline? The practice of training others to follow rules or a code of behavior using punishment to correct disobedience. Now, we look at discipline in the window of dealing with our children. But does discipline stop there? How about at work? Do we get in trouble at work? And there's consequences for our actions. So if we don't teach our kids to deal with that today, how can we expect them to deal with it when they're adults? How can we expect them to deal with it when they're parents or when they become grandparents? I went out and spoke to an organization here in Brevard County, Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. The numbers are staggering of how many grandparents today are raising their grandchildren. In fact, there were several great-grandparents in that audience that are raising their great-grandchildren. We have to make sure that we're breaking that cycle, that we're getting there. Discipline is not bad. It's a corrective measure. And when it's done reasonably and appropriate, it's a great direction. Now, how many of you feared your parents? Okay? And we'll talk about my parents here in a minute. But fear is a great motivator, isn't it? I mean, think about that for a minute. How many of you ever been chased by a bad dog or a bear or something? It's amazing how fast you can run, isn't it, when you're scared of something? Well, fear is a great motivator. It's not a bad thing if it's done right, if it's done reasonably. Parents' role. First, let's look at the characteristics. Loving. How many of you think you're loving parents? Every one of us do. Every one of us, even if we're doing it wrong, we think we love our children and we're doing it right. But love goes very deep. How many of you tell your children every day of your life that you love them? I do. Every day. My son is 29. He's a state trooper on the turnpike. And we talked today on the phone. The last thing we said to each other before we hung up was, I love you. You can't afford to let your kids walk out of that house without reaffirming to them that they are loved. Even when you're mad at them, you have to let them know you love them. Because there will become a time in life where you are the only person they believe they can turn to. And it's important for that bond to be established and to be maintained and be regurgitated constantly. Responsibility. How many of you feel like you're responsible parents? Not one of you. I'm kidding. All right. All right. Responsibility goes very deep. But we have to remember, in fact, we have to jump down to the next to the last bullet on that. We have to compare and put that into a module with a role model. And by that I mean everything we do, responsibility, loving, everything else, we're a role model. And we project ourselves. And remember, perception is reality to most people. So if we project our children that we're responsible in our lives, and that doesn't just go in hold them accountable, it goes in how we prepare ourselves for things, how we do our jobs, how we keep our homes, everything else all goes into that. Responsibility goes very deep. So we have to be responsible, and then we have to come right off the back of that with accountability. We have to be accountable for our own actions, and we have to hold them for their own actions accountable. Role model we talked about, and then communicator. And I will tell you that as we look at those categories, communicator is at the bottom, but it's certainly not last. It is one of the most important things we will do with our children. We have to have an established relationship with them. They have to know that if something goes bad, they can come to you and speak to you. That they can come to you and admit to you they did something wrong. That they know they're going to get in trouble, but still the alternative of not talking to you is unacceptable. What's communication? When I first became a supervisor, I thought being a communicator was being able to tell people what I wanted them to do. I will tell you that's a small percentage of communication. Listening is the biggest part of it. Listening is the biggest part of communication. What is it they say? God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should use them in that amount. We should listen twice as much as we speak. Well, there's a truth to that. Because if you're not listening to your kids, if you're not hearing what they're saying, they're going to quit talking to you. And if every time they come to you, you fly off the handle and go crazy and put them on lifelong suspension, which I've been on before, they're going to quit talking to you. So there has to be a balance. The word reasonable is going to echo a lot tonight. There has to be a balance for it. You've got to communicate with them. I started this program because I shouldn't have to be the chief law enforcement officer in your child's life. I shouldn't. But we have. Today, law enforcement has had to become the chief law enforcement officer in many a child's life in our communities throughout the country. Shouldn't have to be. The mom, dad, or grandparent or foster parent that's raising that child should be that child's personal cop. And we don't live in a society, I hate to tell you this, but we don't live in a society today where we can simply say, I don't have to worry about my child getting in trouble. That doesn't exist. Every one of us has to worry about our child getting in trouble. In fact, when I was growing up, they used to always say that the pastors and the police officers' kids were the worst. Why? Because we don't think our kids would do anything wrong. You bet they will. And you got to be prepared. You got to be on top of it. Life affords no greater responsibility, no greater privilege than the raising of the next generation. Each and every one of us here is responsible for that. Some of you in the room may remember C. Everett Koop, that was the Surgeon General. Other people are probably going, who was that? It's a long time ago. But that statement echoes true today. All right, I talked briefly about law enforcement's role was historically to arrest criminals, but today it's morphed into being parents, mentors, and guidance counselors for kids. So is our teachers. How many educators do we have in this room today? You will know what I'm talking about when I say this. We have completely changed how we treat our educators. We have completely started blaming things on our educators. It's their fault. When the things happened down in Satellite Beach a couple months ago, when the 3 kids with evil in their heart attacked somebody, a lot of people wanted to blame the school. They wanted to blame the law enforcement officers. Well, I got to be honest with you. You don't have to worry about your kid doing something wrong at 10 o'clock at night if they're safely tucked away in their room. Everybody can hold some culpability in this, but it's not just one group or one section that is responsible for it. And quite frankly, we have to step up to the plate and say, it stops with me. From now on, I'm holding my kids accountable. All right, now this is going to be a little bit tricky. I've taught this probably 15 times before, but nothing like I'm teaching tonight. Because I'm going to tell you a little bit about my parents. I'm going to tell you how they were. But it's going to be a little bit difficult for me because my mom is sitting in the front row. My mom and stepdad are here with me tonight. Please give them a hand. Now, usually, I can say whatever I want about my mom, and she's not here to defend herself. So I've got security prepared to escort her out tonight if she starts getting rowdy in defense. But I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to tell any stories, bad stories about her. I'm going to tell you the truth about her and my dad, who I lost in 1997 to cancer. I'm going to tell you about my stepdad, who stepped up to the role. I'm going to tell you right now, they understood that they were the chief law enforcement officers in my life. I wasn't worried about the sheriff in Green Cove Springs, Florida. In fact, I felt like he was the only person that might come to my rescue for what was going on. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, how strict was my mom? She became a school bus driver so she could drive me to and from school every day of my life. True story? I played football and wrestled. I never once went to a away match or a football game that my mom didn't volunteer to drive the school bus so she could keep an eye on me. Her bus monitor on those trips was my dad. I wasn't allowed to sit in the back seat with my buddies. I sat up in the front seat so they could keep a constant eye on me. That's what I was dealing with. And let me tell you something. I'm thankful for it today. I wasn't back then. All the guys picked on me. All right? Hey, is your mommy driving us to school again? Yeah, she is. All right? But she was there. And let me tell you, she held me accountable. I remember one time, and I don't know if she'll remember this or not, but I remember one time I got in a fight on the bus on the way to school. It was early in the morning. I was already in trouble. Got in a fight. She saw it, brought me up on the front seat. When everybody else got off the bus, she turned around, popped me right upside the head. She said, "How'd that feel?" I said, "Not good." She says, "Well, how do you think it felt for him?" I said, "Not good." She wrote me up. She sent me to the dean. The dean looked at the write-up and said, "Boy, if your own mama wrote you up, you must have been really showing off." And so I got 3 licks. When I got back on the bus, I had to sit on the front seat for 2 weeks and not be able to talk. That almost killed me. I'm going to let you know that right now. And then when I got home, my dad disciplined me, not for what I did on the bus, but for embarrassing my mom and forcing her to write me up and send me to the dean. That's what I dealt with. That's what my life was like, all right? My mom wasn't the one that said, "Boy, when we get home, your dad is going to deal with you." She had a bigger philosophy. If you show off in public, you get disciplined in public. That was her philosophy. So I wasn't getting any breaks from Mom, and then we get to my dad. Now, my dad would let things build up. He was like a pressure cooker. You would do something, and you'd go, "Whoo, I got away with that." You didn't get away with it. You just postponed it. That's all it came down to. Because about 3 weeks later, after a couple more had built up, he would go off, and he would deal with things. You have up there my dad telling me to be quiet in class. I brought home when I was a freshman in high school, for the first time in my life, in fact, maybe the only time, straight A's on my report card. And I also brought home straight N's in citizenship because I couldn't be quiet in class. So my dad, sitting at the little breakfast table inside in the afternoon when I came home, and he always wore his glasses down on his nose like this. And he's looking at my report card, and he's looking down, he's looking up, he looks over at me, looks down. And then he says to me, "What do these N's mean?" I said, "Dad, you know what those mean." He goes, "They mean you can't be quiet in class, don't they?" I said, "Dad, let me ask something," because I had my excuses laid out. I said, "Let me ask something. How troubling and out of order can I be if I'm making straight A's in the class?" And my father said this to me, and it's always stuck with me. He said, "Son, even a person with low intelligence can be quiet. As smart as you are, you ought to be the quietest kid in the class. Don't bring these home again." Now, he didn't put more emphasis on academics than he did character and behavior. He balanced them. And that's what we have to do. Because our teachers, many of them sitting in here, they're there to teach your kid how to go on and be successful. They're there to teach your kid not to be the chief law enforcement officer or the mentor or the guidance counselor for your child. You have to be that for them. You have to make sure you're involved in their life. My dad was my best friend till the day he died. He was also the one person I feared most in this world. And my wife, who never had a chance to meet my dad, said to me one time, "How sad that you were fearful of your dad." No, it wasn't sad, because I feared letting my parents down. I feared embarrassing them. I feared losing their respect. I feared letting them down. That's that fear. We talked about fear being a motivator. That's a pretty powerful motivator. It's absolutely what we have to get with our kids today. We need our kids to trust us. We need our kids to know that we're a part of them and they're a part of us. And sometimes we say to them, "Well, I'm going to be involved in your life, and I'm going to go to this, and I'm going to go to that." But do we offer them to come with us to stuff? Do we involve them in our life? It's got to be a balance. It's got to be a reasonable approach to it. And today we live in a parenting time where we see all sorts of challenges. We're going to talk about some of them. But we see challenges like never before. We can't wait till the ball's up in the stands to react. But we have to be careful not to overreact. In fact, I always say, you can't react to something, you have to respond to something. And a response is a well thought out way of going about it. Well, we have to do that. But if you're their best friend, you better make sure. You heard me say earlier, my dad was my best friend, but he never let it get in the way of being my dad. I can tell you that when I lost him to cancer, every day of my life since, there are days where I think about picking up the phone and calling my dad. It's something you never forget. But guess what? The foundation that he and my mom laid are there. And that's the legacy you want to leave for your kids, is that foundation of being a strong and caring parent. That's the foundation we want to leave. All right, so let's look at today versus yesterday. I play this little video. A lot of you in this room, it'll be a walk down memory lane. But it sets the stage for what we're facing today versus what we were facing yesterday. So kind of walk down memory lane if you.
I can't believe we made it. According to today's regulators and bureaucrats, those of us who were kids in the 50s, 60s, 70s, or even early 80s probably should not have survived. Our baby cribs were covered with bright-colored lead-based paint. We had no child-proof lids or locks on medicine bottles, doors, or cabinets, and when we rode our bikes, we had no helmets. We drank water from the garden hose and not from a bottle. We ate cupcakes, bread, and butter, and drank soda with lots of sugar in it. But we were rarely overweight because we were always outside playing. We would leave home in the morning and play all day, as long as we were back when the street lights came on. No one was able to reach us all day. Smartphones? We didn't have cell phones at all. No PlayStations, Xboxes, limitless channels on cable, laptops, or tablets. Facebook was an actual face and an actual book. We had friends. We went outside and found them. We played dodgeball, and sometimes the ball would hurt. We fell out of trees, got cut, and broke bones and teeth. And there were no lawsuits from these accidents. No one was to blame but us. Remember accidents? We had fights and punched each other and got black and blue and learned to get over it. We made up games with sticks and tennis balls, and although we were told it would happen, we didn't put out any eyes. We rode bikes or walked to a friend's home, knocked on the door, rang the bell, or just walked right in and talked to him. Little League had tryouts, and not everyone made the team. Those who didn't had to learn to deal with disappointment. Some students weren't as smart as others, so they failed a grade and were held back to repeat the same grade. Tests were not adjusted for any reason. Our actions were our own. Consequences were expected. The idea of parents bailing us out if we got in trouble in school or broke a law was unheard of. They actually sided with the school or the law. Imagine that. Now, this generation has produced some of the best risk-takers, problem solvers, and inventors ever. We had freedom, failure, success, and responsibility, and we learned how to deal with it. If you've related to anything that was just said, you're one of them. Congratulations. You made it.
At the very end, you heard the narrator say that you had freedom, failure, success, and responsibility. Do we still feel like we have those today? Do we still feel like we have freedom to hold our kids accountable and to discipline them? Do we still feel like we're failures as parents? Well, I'll give you that one. How about success? We have the possibility of all of them, don't we? But we're not doing it. We're not doing it because we've reached a point in our lives where we have said, this is the society we live in, this is what they will accept, and I'm not willing to break that culture. We have to break that culture. We have to be the generation of parents that says, it's time to go back to what was working before, not what we hope works. We got to go back to what was working before. And what was working before? Holding your child accountable, teaching them there were consequences for their actions, and being involved in their lives. So many things have changed today, though. How many of you as parents feel like you know what you have to look for in your to be worried about your child to keep them safe? How many of you become a student of the game? How many of you feel like you're great at technology? In fact, how many of you feel like you're better at technology than your kids are? Think about this for a minute. We used to make a joke, if you will, about the fact that the new prescription bottles they came out with, kids were the only ones that could get them open. Remember that? And today we look at technology and we have to turn to our kids to help us with it. Well, we got to become student of their game. We got to be involved in every capacity. When we look at what's changed today versus yesterday, quite frankly, the social evolution has begun. In fact, it's begun and been started for 10 years. How many of you as parents feel like you are really good at the social media stuff? Really? One. How many of you have a Facebook page? How many of your children have a Facebook page? How many of you are on your child's Facebook page? Fewer hands. You've got to be on their Facebook page. You've got to be involved in it. You've got to monitor everything they do. I say be your child's personal cop. You've got to be that. But what did we do historically? We had to worry about who our children were associating with on the playground, on the school bus. Today we have to worry about it in the bedroom, in the computer, on the texting, everywhere else, because the game has changed. Well, the only way you get back in the game is to be a student of the game, to research and understand everything that they're doing, everything that they're involved in, everything that makes them buzz. And actually, you got to be involved in it just as deep as they are. So we know social evolution has began. How about activities today versus yesterday? I can tell you when I was growing up, we played violent games. A lot of people want to say that, well, you shouldn't play cops and robbers or this and that because it's fine. We played that. We played cowboys and Indians. We played cops and robbers. We played war. We played all of it. In fact, I can remember when we were playing war, I personally invented play hand grenades. It's incredible. We had a hickory nut tree. And I would throw hickory nuts until I hit one of my buddies in the eye one time. And then Mom got involved, and I didn't have hand grenades anymore. But guess what? Their parents didn't sue us. Their parents didn't say, well, you're never playing with that kid again, because parents then worked together. Parents back then were on the phone or talking to each other at the ball game or at the school in the bus driving line. They were talking to each other about what was going on and what they were doing, and they were working together. I'm a big believer in it. It takes a community to protect a community. It takes parents to help other parents raise their kids. And we got to be involved. We can't talk about suing people and doing all this other stuff because who are we really helping there? That lawsuit ain't going to get to the courthouse for 3 years. You got to be involved in that parent thing. We played games outside. We played cowboys and Indians outside. And you know what was different? Today, our children are playing video games where there's no personalization to it. It's not their buddy that they're playing with and pretend shooting. It's somebody on a computer-generated model that they're playing, talking in a headset with somebody they never met before in their life on the internet, and they're getting points for killing somebody. There's no realism to it. It's just, let me see how many people I can kill and how many points I can get. But yet, when we were growing up, we would play for a while we were exercising and doing all the other stuff, and then at the midday, we would all sit down at the table and have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich together, and then go back out and divide teams up and play again. Because we were friends. It was personalized. It's desensitized is what's happened here. And I got to tell you, when your child's playing a video game that allows them to kill people and splatter blood all over the screen, you know whose fault that is? Yours. Because you bought it. Now, I will tell you, my wife and I are extremely opposite when it comes to discipline of the kids. She is over here, and I am over there, all right? I believe in tear that butt up, spare the rod, spoil the child. I believe in tearing it up, and let's move on, all right? 5 minutes later, we're both over it, and we can go outside and shoot hoops or do whatever we're going to do. She likes to put the kids on restriction. I'm not a big fan of restriction. I got to be honest with you. You know why? Because if he's on restriction, I'm on restriction. If he's got to be watched for 2 weeks, I got to watch him. For what? 30 seconds. I can do this. Bam, we're done. But that's her way, and that's okay. All right? Good balance there. But one day she tells me, hey, I got to go to the store. It's his birthday. I said, what you getting? She goes, oh, he wants this video game called Grand Theft Auto. And I chuckled because I thought she was playing a joke on me. And I said, no, seriously, what are you getting? She said, no, he wants a game called Grand Theft Auto. I said, are you serious? I said, do you know what Grand Theft Auto is? She goes, well, it's some game where they steal cars and stuff. Now, you got to keep in mind, I'm married to an Italian-Irish redheaded girl, So I live pretty much in fear, I will tell you that. But I said to her, I said, sit down, I want to show you what this game is. And so I showed her how they not only get points for stealing cars, but for picking up prostitutes and for ripping off drug dealers and for doing all this other stuff, they get points for. And she went, wow, I didn't realize that. Well, that's that student of the game thing. You can't just go buy it because they want it. You got to identify wants and needs, and they're rarely the same. They're rarely the same. So we really have to, as parents, we have to lock down what our kids are watching, what our kids are doing. And it gets worse. It absolutely does. Communication today versus yesterday. Talking at supper versus social media and texting. Ronald Reagan once said that the next great idea for America will start at the dinner table. Well, I can tell you, it'll start in a text message today, because that's how it'll come across. And you know who's the worst violator of it of all? Parents. Because work's more important than sitting there talking with our kids. Can't be anymore. Whatever it is, we'll wait 30 minutes until you finish having dinner with your family. And then you got to take it a step deeper. Because remember, we're role models. So if we're texting, we've made it okay to text. And then you got to take it a step deeper than that. You got to start talking to them at the table. That's hard, isn't it? All right, we sit down, we're all sitting there, and we say, man, we're doing something wholesome. We're eating dinner together as a family. And then the inevitable question will pop out. You'll look at your child and you'll say, how was your day? Because that's what we're supposed to do as parents, right? And then they give us the inevitable answer. What is it? Fine. And we accept that. Oh, well, that's good. And then we cut our meat and we continue eating. That's not a conversation with your kid. In fact, it's not even a positive conversation with your kid. Because I don't know about you, but when my wife tells me everything's fine, it's not fine. It is absolutely not. So when your child's telling you everything's fine, it's not fine. You got to dig deeper. What'd you do? How's this class going? You got to have all of this stuff all lined up to talk to them about. Maybe you got to pull it out of them, because at that age, they don't really want to carry on that conversation. But you have to. You have to get them involved. You have to talk to them. You have to be engaged. We went on a camping trip not long ago, and we rented a motorhome. And my wife had never been camping before, so she wanted to go camping. So we rented this motorhome. Luckily, she didn't like it, so I don't have to have a permanent motorhome. But when we got in the motorhome, I took the kids' phones from them. I said, the entire time we're gone, you're not going to be playing video games and stuff like that on your phones. And they both looked at me and at the same time said, well, what are we going to do? Well, I don't know. Maybe play a board game. Maybe play cards. Maybe go outside and throw the football. Maybe go back to what used to be pretty cool stuff. But it's all changed. And we allow it to change. Listen, too much of anything is bad. So I'm not saying don't let your kids text and don't let your kids do this and that, but don't let it become their entire life. And most importantly, don't let them see it becoming your entire life. You have to find that balance. How about their clothes? Whose fault is that? Absolutely, 100%. Unless you are giving your kid a credit card and sending them to the store and they're coming back with those clothes, that's your fault. And if you're giving them a credit card and sending them to the store, that's your fault. Pick out what they're going to wear. When you look at what raises a kid's level of behavior, how they appear, their personalities improve, everything else. Disney World years ago when they first started grad night made everybody, in fact they do it today, made everybody wear a tie or dress appropriately. Everybody thought, well, they want it to be a really special night. No. Studies had shown that it increases behavior and positive actions. I used to be the head wrestling coach at Vero Beach High School. And I made my kids, the very first year I was there, wear ties to away matches. I told them they had to wear a tie. In fact, I said, if you don't have a tie, come to school, I'll give you a tie. I had a tie, a bag of ties that I'd gotten from a funeral home. And I got to be honest, there wasn't one good-looking tie in that bag. It only took one kid to show up and get a big, nice, fuzzy bow tie, and the rest of the kids wore a tie the next time. But I told them they had to do it for away matches. After they didn't, they had to wear them to school. After they did it, the first time they came to me and said, Coach, we want to talk to you about our tie policy. I said, okay. They said, we want to do it for every match. You know why? because it distinguished them as something positive, as something that was team, as something that people looked at them and thought, wow, they're doing something different. We have to make sure our kids are dressing appropriately. It's our fault if they're not. How about respect? Let me tell you, today's kids have lost the art of saying yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. Yes, sir, and no, sir. Today's kids don't look at you when they talk to you. And part of that is our fault. Part of that is not, we're not putting, maybe everybody's not to the point of yes, sir, and no, sir, and yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. Me, that's the way I was brought up. But the proper measures, the proper things to do when you're looking and talking to people and how you appear, how you shake hands with somebody, all of those things. Kids today, in fact, my wife and I had this conversation not long ago. One of our kids, he's 15, he's going through that growth, was back sassing her. And I jumped all over him. And she said, I had it under control. I said, let me tell you something. If you don't respect your mom, you don't respect anybody. You don't respect that school teacher. You don't respect anybody. And I will tell you, he's a great kid. But at that age, kids do certain things. We just have to pull them back in. We have to get them in that corrective mode. So we have to reinstill respect. How about their music? Look at your kid's iPhone or music library. Look at that. And look at how many times you see the word explicit. And then I guarantee if you go look at your credit card receipt, it'll match up because you paid for those songs. You allowed it to happen. No. But how many of you have ever even looked at your kid's music collection? How many of you have done that? All right? If it's in there and it's not supposed to be, get it out. Because we're just continuing to echo that message. How about TV? What did you grow up watching? What was it? Leave It to Beaver. Was that a TV show? I'm kidding you. What else? My Three Sons? Brady Bunch. How about Little House on the Prairie? Bonanza? Star Trek? Tell me what each one of those shows has in common. Family and wholesomeness. Each and every one of them. And a lot of people say, well, today's different. A lot of families are separated and divorced. The Brady Bunch was experiencing that. That's what it was all about. And it still brought wholesomeness to the table. But that's not what we watch today. Look at what we watch today. Teen Mom. That's invigorating. 16 and pregnant. That's just a big rubber stamp that says it's okay to be 16 and pregnant. That's what that is. Jersey Shore. And I promise you, if you go look at the ratings on these shows, what you will find is that they are some of the most popular shows out there. And they're popular because they're appealing to an audience of young generations. But we're allowing that. And maybe we're allowing it because we don't have the time to sit there and monitor what they watch. Maybe we're allowing it because we're not technology savvy enough to set the parental controls on the TV. But either way, we're allowing it. And I will tell you, I'm as guilty of that as anyone. We all probably are in some degree. Let's talk about school. 1969, you see the parents and the teacher standing on the same side of the desk, pointing at the child, saying, can you explain these grades? And then today, we see the parents and the child standing on the same side of the desk, asking the teacher to explain the grades. Where did that start? I want to know why that was missing in our house. Because if the teacher called home, you were in trouble. It didn't matter what you had to say. You could go home and tell mom and dad all you wanted. The teacher's picking on me. Well, if you were quiet in the class, they wouldn't even know you were there. It didn't matter. It was our fault. Listen, your teachers are there to help your kids have a better life. And if you're not supporting them, then you're supporting them not having a better life. And listen, just like in any other profession, I guarantee if you ask the other chiefs that are here from Titusville and Rockledge, if you ask them or you ask me, every profession has that small percentage of people that are not good for the profession. But the majority of our teachers and our law enforcement officers are good people that do it because they want your child to be better. They do it because they care. I can guarantee you, teachers aren't doing it for money. There is no doubt about that. They're doing it because they care, and you got to support them. When that teacher calls you and tells you that your child is misbehaving, just make yourself say, my child's misbehaving. Because I guarantee you the teacher didn't want to take time out of their day to have to call you and tell you that. It had to be something disruptive. We got to be on the same page. We got to work together. What is the old thing that it takes a village to raise a child? Well, they're part of the village. You got to support them. You got to believe in them. How about back then? What was it like? If I got in trouble at school, I just told you. I was done. All right? The teachers didn't make stuff up. The teachers just told the truth. And the parents backed the teachers up. So we have to do that. We have to be involved in that. I was in court one time down in Fort Pierce long after I became a police officer. And there was a grandfather in there that was raising his grandchild. And he had disciplined his grandchild and left marks on him. He disciplined his grandchild because he brought home straight F's on his report card. And he held him accountable. He got charged. He went in front of the judge. And I was there on another case. And I was sitting there, and the judge called him and his attorney up and was dealing with it. And the judge said, now, Mr. So-and-so, I'm gonna let you have your grandchild back, but only after you complete a parenting class so that you are a better parent. And you see the grandfather, elderly gentleman, look over, talking to his attorney, and he's shaking his head, and the attorney's shaking his head. And finally, the grandfather raises his hand, and the judge says, yes, sir, you can speak. And he said, so, Judge, I just want to be sure you're telling me that I can have my grandchild back after I go to a parenting class. The judge said, yes, sir, that's absolutely correct. He said, well, you keep him then. The judge said, excuse me? He said, I don't need to learn to be a better parent. I was right in what I did. I need you to let me be a parent. The judge calls both attorneys up, talks to them for a few minutes. They go back to their respective podiums. And he says, Mr. So-and-so, I'm going to let you have your child back, but try not to leave marks on him anymore. But I got news for you. The judge didn't want to raise that kid either. We have to be in that mode where we're going to do it reasonable. I grew up around some guys, girls that were raised by their mom, a single mom, who had 14 children. Miss Williams. The kids that were my age were Ivan and Keenan. We wrestled together, we played football together. And there was a well-known fact that Keenan wasn't allowed to be at wrestling practice on Tuesday. Ivan wasn't allowed to be at wrestling practice on Thursday because that was their day to clean the house. So we got a new wrestling coach, Coach Pete McCabe. And one day he was taking us home, and he tells us, I'm going to talk to your mom. He's got Keenan and Ivan and myself in the car. He said, I'm going to talk to your mom about you guys being at wrestling practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And immediately, internally, I said, that's a bad idea. Don't do it. But I figured it'd be fun to watch. So we all got out, and we're standing up on the porch, and Coach McCabe begins to explain to her how important it is for Keenan and Ivan to be at school on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And she's explaining to him how important it is for her house to be clean and for her children to have responsibilities. And so he tells her that team needs them, everything else. She says, well, my team needs them too, but I'm going to make an exception for you, Coach. He says, okay, thank you. She says, I'll expect you to be here on Tuesdays and Thursdays to clean my house. Guess who wasn't at wrestling practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays? Keenan and Ivan. But my story goes a little bit deeper with Miss Williams because she believed in helping raise the kid. Because one day I was over playing basketball in her yard, and Ivan shoved me, and some curse words came out of my mouth. I got the ball, and I brought it back in. Now, I've got to tell you about the basketball court. It was big sand. Backboard was made out of plywood, and the rim was made out of a bicycle tire. That's what we were playing on. I got back with the ball, and I started bringing it in bounds, and all of a sudden I felt an intense pain on the back of my legs. I turned around, and Miss Williams was switching me. She had a switch. And I took off running. Now, I'm going to tell you how old I was. I ran to my car. And when I got home, my mom and dad were sitting in our front porch swing. And they were swinging back and forth. And as I walked by, they saw the blood on the back of my legs. My dad said, boy, what happened to you? I said, Miss Williams hit me with a switch. He said, I bet you won't do that again. They didn't sue Miss Williams. They didn't call the police on Miss Williams. They were thankful that somebody else was being involved in helping hold their kid accountable. Well, that's where we got to be today, because things have changed. There were consequences for our actions back then. Today there are excuses, and the parents are making a lot of them. And I'm going to be tough on you right now. I'm going to tough love you. We got to stop making excuses. We got to hold our children accountable, because we're the only ones that can. We have got to make sure that we're setting the course for them. We can't let being a single parent become a crutch. We know that number, that statistic is tremendous in our society today. So we can't allow being a single parent to be a crutch. We have to use it as a motivator. As a single parent, you know that you have to do twice the work. You know it. And so you have to do it. As a single parent, you know that there are going to be times you're going to feel lonely and afraid and everything else about the outcome of your child. But you're the only person at the helm at that point. So you got to steer the ship. You got to make sure it's being steered right and not use it as an excuse. There are parents out there that say, I don't believe in punishing bad behavior. Well, I guarantee you somebody does. I guarantee you that law enforcement and the criminal justice system believes in punishing bad behavior. I guarantee you that employers believe in punishing bad behavior. And I guarantee you that if we don't set that stage for that parent, that child that's about to be a parent, it's a lost art. And we're going to see our society tumble worse than it already is. My kids won't listen to me. How many of you listen to your parents? No, you didn't. Not all the time. All right? No, we didn't. You know what? We listened when we want to. But the message was so constantly being pounded in, we got it. We picked it up. Your kids won't listen to you, change your delivery style. If your kids won't listen to you, find something that involves them. Break down that barrier, peel back that layer of onion, and get to them. If you go this way and it doesn't work, go this way. And maybe come this way at it. But sooner or later, you're going to get to them. You got to get them to listen to you. They don't know what else to do. I guarantee you that's happening in our society today. There are many parents out there that have reached desperation level. They don't know what to do. They're frustrated. We got to get the kids before they get to us. Parenting through divorce. Both parents have got to be in sync. How many of you are divorced parents? All right. The kid cannot play mom and dad against the middle. If the child is on restriction at the other parent's house, they're on restriction at your house. If the child is involved in sports and it's your weekend to have them, go enjoy them. Go watch them competing. Go be part of that. Don't say, no, it's my time, because it's not your time. It's their time. And it's their only time they'll ever have, their parents sitting in the stand. You heard me talk about my mom driving the school bus. She was always in the stands. My dad was always in the stands. My dad, before I would wrestle, would always wink at me. And that was his signal to me that he knew I could beat the kid. They were always there. We always went to dinner afterwards. It wasn't just sitting in the stands. You can't be afraid to sit in the stands and celebrate your kids' successes. Go enjoy it. Whether you're divorced or not, it doesn't matter. Expectations have to be the same at both houses. My two youngest boys are my stepkids. They're 17 and 15. I will tell you that any kid and any parents that are going through a divorce have different expectations at their house. And usually, when the kids come back, you have to get them back into your mode. When they go away, that parent has to get them into their mode. And so I had gotten conditioned to, when they would come back, very quickly, in the snap, remember where you are. Remember how you're expected to behave. And guess what? My wife said something to me one night, and she was 100% right. She said, shouldn't we expect them to behave wherever they are? Shouldn't the expectation be the exact same of what we expect out of them? Because when we're telling them, when you're here, you got to behave this way, and when you're there, you got to behave another way, we're not helping them. We're just making our life convenient. And she was right. She was 100% correct. Our mistakes that we make, it hurts to discipline. We already talked about that. It hurts to discipline your kids. How many of you use corporal punishment to discipline your kids at any age? How many of you have done that? Did it hurt? It hurts. I'm not sure it hurts more, but it hurts. But it hurt us too when we were growing up. It's a form of punishment. Finding balance in what you want for them and what they want for them. My son was going to be a school teacher. I had already planned that out for him. Didn't matter what he wanted. He was going to be a school teacher and a wrestling coach. Until I found out he didn't want to be a school teacher. I found out because he was making horrible grades in college. And when I sat down and talked to him, he said, Dad, I don't want to be a school teacher. I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I want to be a cop. And even then, I said, no, you don't. But he did. In fact, I tried to defend it. I said, son, you'll never make any money as a police officer. He said, Dad, teachers make less than cops. I said, wow, you got me on that. But you know what? You got to let them live their life. You got to steer them. You got to give them a bunch of good, positive choices, and then help them pick the right one. But ultimately, they got to be happy in what they do. If you love your job, you're going to be successful. You got to let them go that path. Steer them there. You heard me say earlier, he's a state trooper on the turnpike. That wasn't my choice. I wanted him to be a school teacher. Last year, he was the state trooper of the year for the highway patrol because he loves what he does. He's out there. He loves it. You got to let your kids go that course. Parents that are uninformed on today's resources, become a student of the game. Get on the internet. Get on your kid's Facebook page. Get on all of it. You should be the CIA of your children. You should be watching everything they do. You have to. You've got to know what terminology they're using. You've got to get online and research it. We don't do that, though, do we? We don't use a great tool like the internet to help us with our children, to learn different techniques and everything else. What do we use the internet for? I can tell you without failure. We can't remember who played in a movie, so we search the cast of a movie. We can't remember the recipe for cheese toast, so we search that. And the number one thing we use it for is we'll self-diagnose ourselves. We will go in there and type in our symptoms and go, oh, that's it. That's what I got. I knew it. I've only got 3 days left to live. That's what we use the greatest tool around. Start researching what your children are involved in. Start researching the terminology, all the different social media and everything else that's out there. We have to become informed on it. We don't keep a check. How many of you keep a check on your kids? How many of you have ever dropped your kids off at somebody's house or they went over to somebody's house and then you showed up there hours later to check on them? I did. I like to hear parents say, I don't let them know, but I drive by to make sure they're there. I don't. I knock on the door. Hey, are they here? Oh, yeah, they're here. Well, let me see them for a minute. Because the next time, I may not get to drive by, but they're going to think I'm going to come by. We've got to check up on them. Like I said earlier, we used to have to worry about bullying on the bus and in the playground. Today, we've got to worry about it everywhere. We've got to be in constant check of our kids. We've got to know where they are. We've got to keep check on Facebook. We've got to know where they are in person and online. We've got to take those extra steps. Listen, parenting is a 365-day-a-year job, 24 hours a day. It's probably at times the most thankless job in the world until you see the success your kids get to. And then you know you did it right. Our concerns today that we have to keep focused on passwords. 30 years ago, we didn't have to worry about passwords. Today, we got to worry about it. I had a parent tell me, my child won't give me the password to her computer. I can't go in and check up on her. What should I do? Take it? I'm a little bit off the reservation, so let me tell you. My suggestion was, did you pay for the computer? She said, yes. I said, is it a laptop? She said, yes. I said, take it out in the garage, put it behind the tire of your car, and back over it and crush it. You won't need the password anymore, neither will they. Now, I realize that's a little bit hardcore, but there should never be a time where the tail is wagging the dog. We need to control the kid. We need to make sure that if they don't give us the password, we take it from them. Same thing with if they're not driving properly, we take their car keys. We take their toys if they're not behaving, all of these other things. And we all know there's different levels of discipline as kids mature and get older. We use different forms. But discipline is still discipline. We got to worry about drugs today. We have to worry about drugs 30 and 40 years ago. Yeah. In fact, let's not forget, alcohol is a drug. Let's not forget that. So, yeah, we had to worry about drugs back then, but we didn't have to worry about it the volume we have to today. We have kids today that are inhaling hairspray or whatever they're doing. We have to worry about a whole different dynamic. But the only way we know what to worry about is if we educate ourselves, if we become that student of that game. So we have to make sure we're doing that. Sexting. Didn't have to worry about that back then, did we? We do now. And you have to stay on top of it. Bullying on Facebook. There are children today that are committing suicide because they're being bullied so much. Well, I promise you that as a parent, if you're monitoring your child's Facebook page, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Because as soon as it happens, 56,000 children reported being victims of bullying last year. Of those, 55% said that they never told their parents or their teacher or anybody else, any other adult. We have to find that. We have to get where we know it, where we can help them. That's what we're supposed to do as parents. But if we're not monitoring your Facebook page and doing all these other things, we're not going to know. If your child has a Facebook page, you should be a friend on it. And if they won't accept you as a friend, they don't need a Facebook page because they're hiding something or they're embarrassed that you're on their Facebook page. They need to get past that. There's certain things that you have to accept if you want to do certain things. And the number one reason for me is associations. Tonight, I promise you, one of these young men that are up here, if you ask them what happened in their life, they will tell you that they hung out with the wrong people. But I'm going to tell you, they made a choice to hang out with the wrong people. We can't point the finger at somebody else. We've got to point the finger at us. But as parents, we got to pick and choose. My best friend in high school when I was growing up was a kid by the name of Roger Harvey. His dad was the undersheriff for the Clay County Sheriff's Office. My mom and dad forbid me to hang out with him. Think about that for a minute. The deputy chief's son wasn't allowed to be friends with me. I wasn't allowed to go over to spend the night at anybody's house. Not once as a kid growing up did I ever spend the night at somebody else's house. But everybody could come over to our house and spend the night. They kept constant watch. They were shepherds. That's what we have to be as parents. We got to be shepherds. We got to pick those associates for them. And if they're not picking right, then we got to put a stop to it. And that's hard to do. When should I be concerned? Changes in behavior, appears withdrawn, angry, depressed, or having mood swings. So, pretty much describes teenagers, doesn't it? But the reality is you know your teenager, you know your child. You know what's normal for them, what's not. When you see these changes that start to occur, when they're depressed about something, you got to chisel it back and you got to find out why. If they're angry, if they're upset about something, you got to figure out why. Loss of an old friendship. This is one that gets overlooked a lot. You have two kids that have been lifelong friends, and let's say they get to high school and suddenly they're not friends anymore. They don't hang out anymore. They don't associate anymore. Well, it's easy to say, well, they found new friends. But I'd like for you to dig deeper in that. I'd like for you to find out, is maybe one of them doing something that the other one doesn't agree with? Maybe they have picked some bad associates and they're now separating themselves. Maybe your child is the child that's made the right choice. But you got to dig to the bottom of that so you can go alert that other parent what's going on. We have to share information between parents. We have to talk about why these things are happening. Declining grades or trouble at school. As law enforcement, we know that there's a direct connection between declining grades and criminality. There's no doubt. About 7th grade is when we start to see it. A kid starts to decline in his grades at school. Things start going bad. They look for approval from other parts. They're looking for people to say, it's okay, come be with us. And we see that happen. We got to get them help. We got to stay on them. We got to make sure they're doing all their stuff. Skipping school. How many of you skipped school? Wow. Y'all were bad, weren't you? I never once skipped school. Not me. I never once got caught. I can tell you that. I'm a little bit worried about Mom right now. She might get on me for that afterwards. But I can tell you this. You got a kid that skips one day, that's something you deal with, you address. I'm not saying it's okay, but it's something that is not off the chart. But when you got a kid that's skipping certain classes, you got a kid that's skipping all the time, you got a kid that's being problematic and their grades are failing, that's a big indicator. That's something you have to dig in and find out why that's happening. That's a reason that you as a parent have to start holding that accountability. Consequences for our actions. Warning signs of drug or alcohol abuse, physical or mental problems, memory lapses, poor concentration, bloodshot eyes, lack of coordination, or slurred speech. If you've got a kid that's got bloodshot eyes, you've got a simple fix here. Ask yourself, when you were a kid, how many times do you have bloodshot eyes? The answer is pretty easy, isn't it? So you got to start getting to the bottom of why they have that. They have bloodshot eyes or dilated pupils, or you find eye drops. How many of you search your kids' rooms? All right? My kids think they live at San Quentin. I toss their room. I go in there, dump stuff out. I'm very inquisitive. What's that? It's a pencil. Oh, all right. Don't try and hide stuff on me, boy. I'm watching all the time, all right? You have to search their room. If you find eye drops, it ought to register with you that something's wrong. You start finding things missing out of your house, all these other things. Something's wrong. You got to dig into it. You can't put the blinders on. Missing money, valuables, or prescription drugs. Keep an eye on your prescription drugs. They may not even be the person abusing them. They might be taking them to a friend. They might be selling them. They could be doing anything, but you've got to keep a constant watch over it. Ask your own parents. Is our kid asking for money? Are they missing stuff out of their house? Because they might be getting stuff from their grandparents, and you don't even know about it. Sudden weight loss or weight gain. I can tell you, my parents never had to worry about sudden weight loss with me. Not once. But you have to. You have to keep a constant eye and know that something's going on with your child. Maybe they're not doing drugs. Maybe they're just severely depressed because of being bullied at school. But if you're not communicating with them, you're not going to know. You're not going to have that ability. Social media. We talked about a lot of it. But look at the list. Cyberbullying, email concerns. How many of you have the password to your child's email account? Everybody should have the password to their child's email account. And you should be monitoring it. You should give them instructions. They're not allowed to delete anything. They can put it in the delete file, but you have to watch it. You got to do the same thing with their texting. You own their phone. Tell them they're not allowed to delete text messages. And then become Inspector Clouseau. Print out the list of text messages they received and sent and compare it to their phone. And if there's something missing, there's a reason it's missing, because they're hiding something from you. Take the phone from them. Shut down that form of communication. But you've got to be your child's personal cop. You've got to be involved. You've got to be engaged in it. We talked about text messaging, instant messages, cell phones, just different things that are out there. Your kids searching websites they shouldn't be on. Maybe they're looking at porn. Maybe they're looking at other things out there, different crimes or whatever. But if you are monitoring what they're looking at, you know. When you walk in and your computer's got some incredible virus on it, probably a signal, look at the history of what was looked at. Go in and look at all that history and see what are they looking at. Go into the cookies, every part of it, and see. You can put a keystroke capture on your computer. You can download a program that captures every key that's hit. So you'll know if they changed their passwords. You'll know what sites they're going to. It's a very inexpensive tool you can buy at Radio Shack that goes on there. It's a simple way to keep up with them. Cyber statistics. As I told you, 52% of students reported being cyberbullied. They've experienced cyber threats online. 25% have been repeatedly bullied. 52% never told their parents when the bullying occurs. Bullying is real today. It doesn't just happen on the bus or in the playground. It happens through text messages, through the computer, through every aspect you can imagine today. We have to be a part of it. We have to make sure that we understand it's happening to our kid, or our kid comes to us and tells us, I feel bad for little Johnny or little Jane because this is happening to them. Go into action. Spring into action as a parent. What can you do? Establish open lines of communication. I told you at the very beginning, your child can't be scared to talk to you. I know of a parent right now over in Bradenton, Sarasota, Bradenton, that cut off communication with their 18-year-old child because she was dating somebody that they didn't approve of. And you know what? The intuition of parents can't be second-guessed. But they quit talking to her. They quit trying to help her. And maybe that was their form of tough love. But I will tell you, today they regret every day of their life because their daughter got pregnant by the guy. And months after the child was born, he abducted her, killed her and the baby, and they've never talked to her since. And they blame themselves because they cut off that communication. Your child has to believe they can talk to you. They have to believe, yes, I'm going to get punished, but it's okay. My parents still love me. My parents are still with me, and I've got somebody that's standing beside me, even if I was wrong. That's what being a parent's about. Trying to keep them from being wrong, but not being afraid to love them anyway. Encourage your child and pray good behavior. We are quick to jump on our children and say, why did you do that? You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. But are we just as quick to congratulate them on their accomplishments, on their successes? If you're not, go home tonight and start it. Tell them how proud you are of them. Tell them that they are great kids and that you're proud to be their parents, proud to be their mom and dad. Help your child solve and cope with problems. Don't problem solve for them. Teach them to problem solve. As parents, we want to keep our kids from making the same mistakes we made. Well, some of that is because maybe we weren't problem solving either. As parents, we find that today it's more important to keep them from falling down and skinning their knees than it is to be there and pick them up after they skin their knees. You got to teach them to solve problems because they're going to be solving problems the rest of their life. Everybody's going to be faced with problems the rest of their life in some capacity. Volunteer at your child's school and get involved in their extracurricular activities. Not just sit in the stands. Be involved in it. In fact, let me tell you something. How many of you have ever coached your child in a sport? Who's done that? From a parent who coached their son and their daughter in sports their entire lives, I'm going to recommend you don't do that. I'm going to tell you that it's frustrating for you, it's frustrating for them, and it's not fair to them because they can't be wrong. They're the coach's kid. They got to win. They're supposed to win. They should never lose. Well, guess what? That's unfair to put on that child. If you love coaching and you want to help kids, you coach the other team. You coach the older team than your kids' team or the younger team. You'll still be there at the field. You'll all still be together, but let somebody else coach your kid. You be in the stands winking at your child as they're out there because that's what they need. That's what they want. I promise you. I look back, I coached my son from the time he was 4 years old on the wrestling mat. My child could throw a Japanese wizard before he could tie his shoe. That's not a joke. But guess what? It wasn't fair to him because I coached him all through high school. And when he went away to college to wrestle, he learned a lot more than he ever learned from me because he wasn't worried about all the pressure. Plan family activities without technology devices, put them down. It'll wait. I got to tell you, my 15-year-old, we're sitting at the house one night, and I'm sitting at the table. And as I'm sitting there, I see my wife pick up her phone and go, and then she sends a text message. I said, what's wrong? She said, Michael. I said, Michael? She goes, yeah, he just texted me and asked me what's for dinner. He's in the room. He was physically closer to her than I was. And so then, as I'm going, what? She goes, oh, and texts him again. I said, what was that? She said he wanted to know what time. So I got up from doing what I was doing, and I headed for his bedroom because I was going to choke him. She got between us. And then it dawned on me, we caused that because we communicate through text all the time and everything else. Pick up the phone if you have to. Talk in person. Texting, for what? All right? We're teaching our kids that that's the acceptable way to communicate. We got to communicate like we were supposed to. What should you do? Establish an expectations and consequences. Be a good role model. Show understanding, respect, patience, and firmness. Know who your child's friends are and stay involved in their friendships. And I mean deeply involved. Be suspicious. How many of you are suspicious of your children? Boy, I am. I can tell you that right now. How many of you interview your children? I do. In fact, I interrogate them. When they come home, I surprise attack them. They'll walk in the door about once or two, every 2 months I try this. I'll say, you got anything you want to tell me? The 17-year-old about a year ago, I got him. He come in the door, I said, you got anything you want to tell me? I said, go ahead, boy. So he tells me, I felt horrible because he admitted to getting in trouble at school and I tricked him. But we were able to deal with it. Interview your kids. Talk to them. Be engaged. The best thing that can happen to you is for your children to start interviewing you. That's the best thing that could happen because that's an open line of communication where we feel comfortable to talk to each other. Stop believing everything they tell you is the truth. Did you lie to your parents? I did, Mom. I know that's hard for you to believe, but I did. If you lie to your parents, your children will lie to you. So stop believing everything they tell you is the truth. Get involved, investigate, be able to read their body language, talk to them, know when they're telling you the truth, know when they're not. Discipline and hold your child accountable. Don't be afraid to do what's right. Be innovative in your approach to parenting. Now, I've went through all this presentation. I haven't gotten in trouble yet with my mom, but I'm about to. Be innovative. Be innovative in your approach to discipline. Be innovative in your approach to communication. But balance it. Don't go overboard. My mom invented slap yourself. You think I'm kidding you? I'm not. On a trip to Sarasota, me and my two brothers were in the back seat fighting. Mom couldn't get to us because the seatbelt was on. She turned around, she looked at my oldest brother, Arthur, and said, slap yourself. Whack! He slaps himself. Me and my other brother looked at him like he was crazy. She said, that wasn't hard enough, slap yourself again. He slaps himself again. Still wasn't hard enough, slap yourself again. Third time wasn't hard enough. So she takes her seatbelt off, turns around, and she slaps him. She looks at me, slap yourself. No. I leaned up where she could get a good cut, and I got one. Don't be that innovative, all right? Don't do that, but be innovative in your approach. You have to be involved in your children's life. You have to teach them there's consequences for their actions. You have to let them know you love them. You have to let them know and understand what responsibility and accountability is. And you have to let them know that 10 or 15 or 20 years from today, there's a good chance that they're going to be a parent. And they need to love their kid enough to hold them accountable. They need to love their kid enough to tough love them. They need to love their kid enough to be involved in their life. I am who I am today, largely in part because of my parents being involved in my life. Not being scared to hold me accountable. Not being scared to believe that the teacher was right, and not being scared to teach me the difference between right and wrong. Please do that. Please get to your kid before anything ever lets them get to me at that jail. Because I promise you, your heart's going to be broken if that happens. Don't let that happen. Be involved in their life.